That's right. So we thought a really good way to kick off would be to ask Dan to tell you everyone a little bit about Bromley by Bow Health Centre. So we've got a video that Dan made a couple of days ago. Dan is around tonight, so anybody that's here, as I said before, do grab him. I'm sure he would love to talk to you. But this is, thank you. This is Dan.
Welcome to the Bromley by Bow Centre. It's a huge honour and a pleasure to have everybody here this evening. And the evening is talking about how we create health and well-being in our communities, how communities come together with the organisations within them to do that. And I think it's a great evening to have here at Bromley by Bow, because that's exactly what we've done at Bromley by Bow, starting 35 years ago with this church here, the Bromley by Bow Church, which was a dilapidated church in East London in the mid-1980s, with a tiny and old congregation and a couple of £100 in the bank, to which Andrew Mawson arrived and literally and metaphorically flung open the doors of the church and invited the community in to come to Bromley by Bow and start to build community in what was really quite a broken community as it was then at the time. And it was that we've been doing for the last 35 years. And if we swing around now, we're going to see something quite interesting that's happened during the COVID period. Here we have the stacks on racks of trolleys that bring in the food every Monday morning to the food bank that we brought here to the Bromley by Bow Centre under the first months of COVID, and we've been giving emergency food out to about 700 or 800 families every Monday morning ever since. It's been obviously a traumatic and tragic time for many of us, but it's also been a moment in which community has come together to work on the needs it's got and find the opportunity to support those who are most vulnerable. And a huge number of volunteers here at the Bow Food Bank, which is sited here within the Bromley by Bow Centre now, and it's been a most remarkable experience as well. And here we are at the entrance to the Bromley by Bow Centre. This is what was created, as I say, out of this dilapidated church. And it was about 15 years into our journey that we developed the Healthy Living Centre model here at Bromley by Bow. And we're just going to be greeted now by a couple of our GPs who are walking past, coming in with their lunches, having had a very hard morning here at the centre. Great to see you both. Good to see you. And this is exactly it. This is a health centre. It's a community centre. It provides general practice, but it provides a whole range of other services here to the community. And as you'll see, it's framed by this beautiful William Kent arch, which originated actually in Northumberland Avenue near Trafalgar Square. And it was then stuck on the back of the church here, and we prized it off and helped to create this really, really beautiful entrance to the Bromley by Bow Centre. And if we walk in, we will see, instead of being greeted by blue and white NHS signs, we're greeted by a beautiful water feature, sculptures by one of our artists here at Bromley by Bow, some fantastic planting, and this absolutely therapeutic entrance to both the Bromley by Bow Centre and the Bromley by Bow Health Centre here. And this is about framing people's arrival, helping people to think differently about coming here. We like to call Bromley by Bow a place of possibilities. So yes, of course, you might come here to see the doctors, but you might come here to sing opera, you might come here to learn English, or you might get some support sorting out your welfare benefits issues. All of those things are entirely possible at Bromley by Bow. You might become a volunteer, and hopefully one day you might move on to work here as well. And so Bromley by Bow creates all these opportunities with its community, both about resolving needs, but also about creating opportunity. This is the waiting area at the Bromley by Bow Health Centre. And what we've done here is to create what we call an intelligent waiting room. Instead of patients sitting here forlornly staring at their shoes, we've got a room full of art. We've got floor walkers who talk to patients when they come in. We've got social prescribing here at Bromley by Bow, of course, at the heart of our model. And we're really rethinking the way we do consultations with patients. We're looking at a really interesting program now about working with patients with long-term health conditions, which takes the premise that you start with social prescribing as part of the consultation on the 6 months or 3 monthly health checks with those patients to support them not just around their health needs, but also around their social needs as well. So here we are in what's called Bob's Park. And why is it called Bob's Park? Well, this has been one of actually London's little mid-19th century, and Bob was the park keeper in the 1940s and 50s. This park then went into absolute decline and rack and ruin, and the park on a 30-year lease as we were building our new health, this wonderful primary care health facility that's completely integrated with a brand new community facility and our eco barn here as well. And this provides for a whole range of activities for our community. We provide probably about 70% of what we do at Bromley by Bow on non-clinical services, community development, as I've mentioned before, adult learning, employability programs, healthy lifestyles programs, but also we provide somewhere for people to come and be and to help create this sense of community. We have a wonderful cafe, for example, here. We have seating areas. We have social care integrated into our model here as well. We have a whole series of artist studios and artists working with us. We have community gardening, this 3-acre local authority park now, and we have a lovely allotment bed where people come and grow food together and so on. And then this park becomes a fantastic site for community events. Every year we hold a number of big community events where we have hundreds, sometimes thousands of people here in the park celebrating, almost if you like the village green, where the whole community comes together to celebrate different events during the year and so on. And this, we feel, is absolutely critical to the model of health and well-being that we're trying to create for our community, which is about people coming together to share, to learn together, and to develop a model of lifestyle and community, building relationships, reducing social isolation, and helping each other. And this sits alongside and is integrated with primary care. And as I mentioned before, social prescribing is a key part of that. But it's also then about rethinking primary care. How does primary care work with community differently as well? So it's about bringing these two together, and we think co-location and integration go hand in hand, and actually having this model here at Bromley by Bow of these things situated together, having primary care teams working side by side and integrated with social programs, is a wonderful way of transforming health services and building health and well-being within our communities.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's an absolutely insightful video. What a wonderful space. I feel very blessed to be here today. And on top of that, we have Louise and Tess. And Louise and Tess are going to talk to us about nurses supporting care homes with patient-centered activities during and beyond COVID. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Louise Keane. I'm the nurse educator for North Central London.
I'm Tess Murdoch. I'm a quality assurance nurse for care homes with NCL CCG Haringey Directorate.
So we've come this evening to talk to you about nurses, which was myself and Tess, supporting the care homes with person-centred activities during and beyond COVID. Next slide.
Louise and I both have community nursing background. Before the pandemic, we were working at different areas. However, our common goal.
So we're not quite sure how much you heard of that, because I think we've had a bit of a technical hitch. But let us just explain what we did. So we engaged with residents and staff, and we had student volunteers, and we did this via technology. And what we did was we tried to make a safe place for residents and staff to come together and to find some common themes, and to bring back happiness and joy, really, and that people started to communicate. We started to see moods lifting, people being happier, people engaging, and more people coming. And what we got from our students that were coming in to support us is that they told us that their communication skills had improved, and that actually they were all looking forward to the sessions that they had with the residents.
And also, Louise, I just wanted to add that although we were using technology, we're using technology not just for healthcare interventions, but for social connections. But we remain committed to our objective, and that is to ensure that care home residents are supported to engage in meaningful and person-centered activities.
Thank you. Next slide. So here we go. So this is our art that we did. So I thought I'd tell you a story because I think that really explains best what we did. So in the corner over there, you'll see a picture, and that's a seaside scene. And we did a session with everybody drawing the seaside, and people started to talk about their memories of the seaside. And a gentleman started to tell us about his childhood and what happened, and that he used to fly a kite with his family. And what we did is that we got the students to organise a kite making session the following week. This gentleman spent all week telling everybody about what he was going to do and his memories of flying a kite. And staff reported that they'd never seen him so happy and so engaged. And to say we had our flying kite session the following week was great fun. So next slide, please.
And these two are the gardens from our care homes, which were done and improved by the residents and staff. Gardening is one of the virtual activities that we started in the summer, and it was met with enthusiasm from residents and staff, particularly when they received the sunflower seeds. They really enjoyed doing the gardening, joining the gardening club. The aim of the activity was to engage the residents as well as the staff to do gardening, enjoy the garden, and stay outside and enjoy the nature, and also to improve physical activities and also we use that as an opportunity to engage in meaningful interactions. We also, aside from the virtual gardening club, we also started a gardening newsletter, which includes the photos from our care homes, and also we added the tips and suggestions from our residents and staff who enjoy gardening.
Excited, that's us done. So here we go. This is our art competition that we've just done, and this is a successful entry. This is a lady who lives in a nursing home, and this is a picture of her street. While doing this art piece, she reminisced about her street, and people found out lots about her that they were then able to improve the care that they gave her. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got loads of activities to share, but hopefully that we can share it next time.
Thank you, that's absolutely phenomenal.
Thank you.
I have to say, I apologise for the technical difficulties. I know that on chat, everyone's been saying that they can't hear, and I think the picture quality is not so great either from where we're transmitting, so please bear with us. And also we are running quite late. So the next event that we have is we're going over to Louise, and Louise has a video for us. Berenice. So this is with Green Social Prescribing Pilots. Do bear with us. So grab a cup of tea, a cup of coffee whilst you're waiting.
For London at Natural England. Unfortunately, I'm unable to be there today, so I'm sending a very brief overview of some of the work that Natural England are doing and will be doing in collaboration with some of our fantastic partners. So to start off, Natural England's vision is thriving nature for people and planet. And some of the ways we're progressing to deliver our vision is driving forward local nature recovery networks and strategies, furthering the offer of green and blue social prescribing, and also delivering frameworks for green infrastructure standards to bring nature to everyone's doorstep to not only support people's health and well-being, but also to ensure we're tackling biodiversity loss and climate change issues. So to talk a little bit about some of the great work that we'll have upcoming in the next month with some of our partners. Firstly, we have the Nature Nurtures programme, which will be delivering nature walks across 5 London Wildlife Trust nature reserves in Greater London, and London Wildlife Trust will be leading on this work. So the aim is really to overcome some of the barriers that young women and girls face from the ages of 11 to 25 in accessing and engaging with the natural urban environment. And through these nature walks, it's hoped that they'll be able to access the mental and physical health benefits that only connection to nature can really bring, such as improved mood, resilience, well-being, and also their. We have Wembley's Wilderness and Neasden's Naturehood project, which will be delivered by the London National Park City Rangers. And the aim here is really to support those from lower income households and those particularly underrepresented in nature connection to engage with the natural environment on their doorstep, discover the local area, and participate in blue and green social prescribing activities, such as forest school activities for adults and children, nature art workshops, and conservation work such as planting trees. And it's hoped that this will support the health and well-being of the local community and also provide a framework for delivering similar projects across Greater London. And finally, just to finish, we've been working really closely with the National Academy of Social Prescribing within Natural England. And particularly within the Greater London region, we've been working closely with London Plus, London Sport, Arts Council England, Historic England, and the Money and Pension Services, as well as many, many other fantastic organisations. And I'd be really grateful if you could take 5 minutes to complete the Greater London Social Prescribing Survey with the QR code below to help us answer some of the questions that we're looking in how we can support social prescribing, who currently exists within the social prescribing network and the activity providers, and where we can help to address some of the gaps in place. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Louise. So thank you, that was great. So we were going to move into the church, but because of some technicalities, we're actually going to show a film first. We're going to show the film from Spotlight. Thank you.
Diamond, listen, yeah, I just hit her with the wave, yeah. I just hit him with the wave, I just hit her with the wave, oh nah, nah. I just hit her with the wave, I just hit her with the wave, oh nah, nah. I just hit her with the wave, I just hit her with the wave, I just hit her with the, I just hit her with the wave, I just hit her with the wave, oh nah, nah. I just hit her with the wave, had to turn over 'cause you're not on my page. Laugh at my age, yeah, they laugh at my age. And they'll be all the rage when I take over the stage. Yeah, my stain may be light, but my buzz, they come heavy. I stay fly with the good hair, like Becky, no tech. But I get there, techie, no other MC. They don't ever want test me, 'cause I'm the best, and I say that with my chest. They can keep winning their checkers, but can't beat me in my chest. You can put me in a frame, but I ain't no picture. You can put me in the game, but I always be a winner.
Some people that don't have a sense of belonging. And when you come to a place like this, you can just be yourself and you don't have to hide nothing. And I feel like it inspired a lot of people.
We get a lot out of it. It's just a time to like bond with each other. It's just a good experience. The people around us are just really positive.
Something about here just makes me feel like at home, and it's like, actually no, this is the place for me.
With the wave, I just hit her with the wave, oh nah, nah. I just hit her with the wave, I just hit her with the wave, oh nah, nah. I just hit her with the wave, I just hit her with the wave, oh nah, nah. I just hit her with the wave, I just hit her with the wave, oh nah, nah.
Welcome back, everyone. I just love Spotlight's music, don't you? There's so much of it. Please do check out their website as well. And Helen Jones from Spotlight wants to be here today, but she couldn't. But please do check out her video on YouTube as well, Helen Jones and Spotlight. They do absolutely amazing work. That leads us very nicely into a break. So we're going to break for 5 minutes, Berenice, is it 5 or 10? 5 minutes, exactly. So have a cup of tea and we'll join you soon. And we're playing Spotlight.
Has left me kinda cagey. Conversation breaks, I'm feeling shaky, cause I think I love you, though I don't know you. You're right in front of my eyes, so let me show you. When the strings begin to play, all my memories fade away, and random thoughts encounter. Caught up in the moment, looking, waiting on my cue. I move to something new because
the break, and now we're going over to Martin. Just to say, everyone, in terms of the speakers, please introduce yourself fully. We are just briefly introducing you by first name, and tell us all your titles, your wonderful titles. Over to Martin now.
Hello, can you sort of hear me? Okay. Sort of vague silence, a bit worried. If you wave your hand, you can hear me. Be good.
Martin, we can't hear you.
That's a real worry, isn't
You can.
it?
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, we can hear you, Martin. We can. Sorry, we're having some different speakers, but we can hear you, Martin, loud and clear. Go for it.
Okay, fine. My name is Martin Griffiths. I've got a lot of hats. I've only got 5 minutes, but I'm a vascular and trauma surgeon at the Big Blue Box in Whitechapel. I'm also the regional and national clinical director for violence reduction. I'm going to talk to you about violence, actually, if that's okay. Not from the practicalities of what I do for a living, but and not just about from a health perspective, but about how I see the journey of authority in this relationship to violence in our community. So mechanistic approaches towards violence in terms of measuring its outputs are a bit pointless. Talking about crime and injury doesn't really help us get through around the issue around the fact that we see interpersonal violence as the output of a struggling society that's driven by institutional bias and disproportionality. So if you swim in that sea, it's not surprising that individuals who are traumatized, living in traumatized communities, find significance and value in outputs that don't sit in the norm. That's not surprising why individuals who live with us in the communities that we are part of are victims, perpetrators, and observers of violence. So how do we as a community move forward? And how do we as organizations work differently to understand how we got there and how the situation evolved perfectly into this storm of intractable, wicked problems? So it starts at sort of a personal level, isn't it? It's about us understanding our own personal journeys to where we are in the situation, about our own personal traumas, about how we view the world, about how we interact with our society. It's about working out how authority works to a community and how people who aren't necessarily part of authority communicate and extract information and value from authority. It's about how organizations have been damaged by their own experiences and now are dysfunctional, communicate poorly, and don't work towards resolving an issue. And all that counts for naught to a 14-year-old boy or girl who lives in a community with driven by violence. They want support, they want vision, they want significance, they want to be themselves and feel engaged and listened to and empowered. How does that start? That starts by us dealing with our issues around equity and diversity. It starts with us understanding how we got to where we are. It starts with us actually working as a community coherently. Let's understand how organizations work and communicate. Let's deal with siloism. Let's deal with that disproportionality. Let's deal with how we, as organizations and advocates for change, work together. Let's try and level that hierarchy first. We have traditional views of looking at violence as either as outputs like violence or looking at things like deterministic models of be it looking at violence as a infectious disease, which is quantifiable and measurable, looking at data. We devise these fantastic authoritarian prescriptive models which are not based in the real world. But violence reduction is based on hope, understanding, love, and forgiveness. And it starts with individuals who love and trust and have validity in their own space, in their own community, in their own relationships, and they are secure and trusted. And that starts from people who are reflective on their own journeys, are undamaged by those journeys, and prepared to communicate and support each and every one of us to be significant and powerful in their own space. And that starts with us looking at the beginning, at young people, at parenting structures, at communities. It starts with us supporting empowerment. It starts with us working together as a coherent body to advocate for support, understanding, and reflective working. It speaks to us working very hard to understand what drives disproportionality and institutional bias, the hubris, the fear, the concerns around that, and trying to be transparent about who we are and what we represent, and celebrating diversity and celebrating our own individual achievements and challenges. So how does that play out in the real world? Well, intriguingly enough, though I've got a remit around social prescribing and education and training and all these kind of resources, we start with the emotional and mental health of our communities. So our biggest investment is around looking at mental health of young people and their families, providing support in that space and putting that practice in the hands of the community, empowering local advocacy, empowering local delivery, empowering local understanding to understand and address its own issues in situ, not dragging people around the town. It's about allowing communities to diagnose medically and treat medically, if they want to, their issues, but actually about trying to give that authority back to the community and asking ourselves why we feel comfortable doing that. When we move from that prescriptive, hierarchical, or autocratic way of doing business, we change our society and change our relationship with authority, and people, whatever generation or the demographic, can start to feel part of a community. We've seen, Bronnie by Bow, what that looks like. Years of constructive effort to engage, support, and celebrate a community has built this amazing edifice. It's an amazing message, it's amazing positivity. And we can do that, not just as individuals, but as societies, communities, and actually as a nation, if we're prepared to work in that. We've learned from COVID what bad communication looks like, what bad listening looks like, what automatic practice looks like. And we've learned that we can change our organizations, we can change our views, we can change our bias to work towards supporting the empowerment of individuals. And those individuals can teach us how to do our work better. But each of our journeys is individual. We have to think about how we interact differently. So from my perspective, as somebody who's charged with trying to help us understand this better, I think you have to recognise that the violence we're seeing in our society is not so much about access to drugs or weapons. It's about the bias in our community. It's about the fact that there's a lack of opportunity for individuals to actually express themselves in a meaningful manner. It's about us not recognising that trusted relationships and forgiveness is the cornerstone of what helps young people to develop. And if you don't give people tangible, palatable, deliverable change, they will look elsewhere for it. So we, as healthcare providers, social care workers, community activists, have to work together to understand our own personal bias, understand our own barriers, and to work together to support the empowerment of individuals, to speak for themselves, and give people the opportunity to be powerful in their own space. Their output might sit with our aims or our ambitions. However, if we create a knowledgeable, curious, confident community, the issues around violence will disappear. And I absolutely guarantee that's proven in data. Now, we could talk all day about definitions and bias, but from my perspective, what we really need to do as people in authority is think very carefully about how we interact with the people we support and we serve. The communities we live in deserve better care than we're providing. The communities we live in deserve more transparent and honest communication. The communities we live in want to be powerful in their own space, and we need to advocate that, showcase that, and fiercely support that. And my call to you is the recognition of what great work you are party to, what great ambitions we have in as a group, but for us to strive together to work and to understand our own bias, our own challenges, to be coherent and to support the development of individuals, groups and societies that speak for and in that community. And with that in place, we're in a position to move forward. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. I'm just wondering if there's anybody maybe in the audience here that would like to ask anything. I'm stunned.
And Martin, I don't know whether you could hear the huge round of applause that you got from this space. It's absolutely phenomenal what you spoke of. I wrote so many notes down: forgiveness, bias, empowering people in their own space. It just touches our hearts. And I think we might we've got one more speaker. We've got Jay coming on next, and thereafter, would you mind hanging on, because there's a Q&A that we're doing? Is that right?
That'd be grand. I'm just going to put the boys to bed. I'm back in a bit. Is that okay?
Over to Jay. Jagan's
just going to do a quick story.
Jay, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey.
Hi, Martin. Hi, everyone.
Hi. I'll do a quick story. Is that okay? Back in a bit.
Yeah. Great. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me for starters, speakers? You can hear me, I'm assuming. Someone.
Yep, we can hear you. Yeah.
So, hi, everyone. People who might know me, and apologies if you do know me. I'm Dr. John. I'm a GP in Barking and Dagenham. I am the North East London CCG chair. I also am the clinical lead for personalised care across London and North East London. So some of the fantastic work that you've been hearing about people's, what they've been doing over the last couple of the last 2 days of the events, we're hearing about the fantastic work that people, professionals and the wider voluntary sector have been doing. It's really heartwarming, really, to be honest. And I think for me, I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 things in the couple of minutes that I have. From my perspective, something about resourceful people, strong communities, and of course fair environments. And what we've been hearing from Martin and others on this is really that it's something about how we inspire each other. There is something as professionals and as colleagues and the people that we influence of how we inspire people to work in a way that brings hope to people, brings self-worth in the way that we are working, and of course empowering people to have self-worth. And there's something about the fact that looking across London and some of the work that we've been doing across London is actually, we realise very quickly that actually the solutions that we have are actually in people, not organisation, not structures, but in actually our resourceful people. And over the last probably 8 years that I've been working on social prescribing across London with the likes of Dan and others that you've heard, what you've heard is our GP colleagues and their teams really looking at doing something different, not really sticking to the boundaries of their workplace or what they've been trained, but going much further into their communities and, taking their hobbies into their communities and in their workplace, designing things in a way that makes and empowers people to encourage some of the biases that you've heard that Martin's been talking about, but breaking down some of the barriers between people and professionals going forward. So we're a collective group together. And what's inspiring about people is the fact that they really tackle those health inequalities head on. You know, something about, you know, those communities, racial biases that you heard about, that our speakers have been talking about, some of those things that we've heard about poverty and some of the things that people are doing to try and address that, but also looking at the way they work. For example, you've heard that Bromley by Bow, but what we have seen across London is that GPs and their teams redesigning their health centres in very small ways, you know, putting those green spaces that Tamsin talks about across all our buildings and spaces, looking at how we can be more sustainable in the future and giving something quite inspiring back to the local communities. And HealthSpot, if you look at the analogy of what HealthSpot's trying to deliver, it's really trying to create something with the youth in North East London, and there are various organisations and places all across North East London that are really trying to be embedded in the community. And what's been really helpful in that is when COVID did come along, it tried to address, it used those centres, and those people were almost key to dealing with isolation, dealing with inequalities, and also just building those strong communities. Up and down in London, we've heard, for example, of the Lambeth Food Corp and other organisations where they've developed a bunch of patients and staff have developed a community that develops and makes produce for the local area, sells it to invest into their community. And what that has developed in a lot of our areas in London is that resilience where people are doing things for themselves, but also helping and supporting that workforce. And a lot of that is down to the kind of ethos of social prescribing. But social prescribing in London and wider has actually been here for a long, long time. It was called lots of different things, and it's just been developed and named in different ways. And Bromley by Bow, 25 years, 30 years in the making, is testament to that. But for me, there is a challenge that we all need to do, and that's something about how we help our colleagues look at things in a slightly different way, where we can think about that fairer environment, doing those small changes in our practice, in our homes, and of course, with our working staff. Some of the best examples I've seen is where all staff become inspired to do things slightly different, contribute in an active way, and creating that sense of worth across not only the practice, but in some respects, developing a sense of worth for the NHS. And one thing I've realised is that looking at all the best examples, and something that I get inspired is the smallest changes in practice actually creates huge waves of change across the community. And for me, I think that is something that we all need to inspire and develop collectively, not only as leaders, but also as developing what we want for our children and the people around us for in the future. There is something much wider about creating healthy hobbies, looking at prevention in the widest sense, and some of the work that Martin and we as a group collectively in personalised care are trying to do is trying to look at gang violence, for example, by looking at areas that actually see it as something that happens in the local area, and thinking of that differently to say, what could we do differently that could inspire, using all our workforce, those social prescribing link workers, those GPs, those families that have been traumatized by all of this, working with our hospitals and those really passionate and influential individuals like Martin, and saying, how can we do something differently? And I'm quite proud that we're trying to pilot 2 things in our area based on those kind of things, where people have taken it upon themselves to look at what the population locally needs and trying to inspire and develop solutions collectively with the community. So what we do have, though, is a massive challenge. We have an ability to create a movement where the inspired individuals on this call can create something much bigger than just not what our NHS organisations provide, but create something that we could develop primary care into something really fantastic that inspires people to work locally, actually train locally, but also be involved locally. So all I can say is thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm very happy to answer any questions, but certainly in North East London, we're quite keen to support this work and the individuals in this group, and certainly would love to hear any of your ideas. And we've been positively happy with everything that people are doing. You've been really inspiring, and certainly has been inspiring for me, and I'm certainly learning a lot every time I come on these calls. But thank you very much.
Thank you, JJ. Thank you, Jagan. And as we sit here, we have two people sitting knitting. I think by the time we get to the end of the evening, it'll be a blanket or something. We've got a question that's come from AR in the chat to Martin to say, how does Martin suggest we try and work together, and who are the agencies? I think it's crucial that we all work together on different issues. Any ideas for the best way to go about doing this?
Yeah, well, I think I would start small. I think this is a human problem in human systems, and it needs a human approach. And I think we start off by being kinder to ourselves and other people and trying to understand what we're doing. I like to listen to understand rather than listen to speak. I think when you start doing that, you start to hear differently. I think we talk about cultural competence, cultural credibility, but actually being a human being first is the first thing what we need to do. When we start taking that approach into systems and organizations and take a slightly less pejorative view on behaviors in ourselves, we start to think a bit more about how we communicate effectively and looking at the journey, how we got there. Systems evolve naturally to be as they are. And I think that what we start to do is by working with individuals and communities to develop that kind of connection, understanding, and learning, that two-way learning that allow us to empower both ourselves and those people we're trying to serve and support. Once that starts to build that little trickle of positivity, it becomes a torrent of good news. And I've delivered spectacular success working with people who were thought to be impossible to reach and support. We've young boys and girls and PRUs who are thought to be unreachable are now volunteering and working within the trust. We've got individuals who are entrenched members of gangs who are now working as volunteers and delivering social prescribing and delivering clinical care in our space. Individuals who weren't in school who are now teachers and trainers and alumni and programs. So that's all deliverable. And all GOS bodies like the Royal London, which were trauma-tastic values system we've been doing for 30 years, who've changed how to do business based on the evidence of listening and learning. So it's all entirely possible.
Thank you, Martin. I know that we have two questions from the audience. So would it be easier if we brought you over here or we can zoom over to that area? Amina, would you like to come over? And we've also got Leslie Perkins as well.
Hi.
Yes, would you like to go for it?
So I had, when I was doing our pain group here at Bromley by Bow, one of the reflections I had about myself was the amount of distance I had to travel in my understanding of my professional power and status, and how far I had to let go of that in kind of co-producing a group with women who live with pain. So, and I know that a lot of the examples that we've had have been people who've made that journey, like we saw from last week as well. And I just wonder how we support our professional colleagues to make that journey with us on a much wider scale than we have now. So that's my question.
I don't know, look at that. I think it's really interesting, actually. I think that the journey towards being a more authentic version of yourselves by acknowledging that you don't come from a perfect scenario. And I think that when you have that, I think I start thinking like professional intimacy by sharing things about myself and my life with colleagues in a way that allows us to broker a kind of relationship that allows us to speak in that way. And I think, and then we can start having a dialogue about the fundamental about how we practice and what our practice means to us, and trying to dig into the why of what we do for a living, and rather than the how, and discuss vulnerability and fragility in that space. And once you start opening that door to trying to understand the person behind the professional mask, once you start to understand the journey that person's taken to get where they are, so you can see their own individual traumas and their lived experience and the adaptation they've used to deal with their traumas, you start a conversation about change and about empowerment and about recognizing that change exists with every person you interact with, be that a colleague, a client, a patient, or a person on the bus. I think once you start doing that, you can start to begin that journey towards unpeeling all those issues, picking those bits about you, and try to become a more genuine and authentic version of yourself.
So the only thing I wanted to add, because Martin's, I'm not going to reiterate Martin's about, you know, that self journey and also how you want to break down some of those barriers, but certainly from a perspective of organizational thing, I think part of the thing is actually communicating what you're doing. One of the biggest issues that I have is I don't understand. I get hundreds and hundreds, honestly, I get hundreds and hundreds, God knows what Martin gets, but I get hundreds of projects being told. It's really difficult to communicate because they don't, you know, sometimes I have to meet people to understand the amazing work that they've done. You can't hear it on a piece of paper or even an email. And I certainly think it's the skill of making sure you communicate whatever you're doing really well. And then we really understand it. And I think sometimes it's the job of the NHS organisations to work with you to make it, to put it to something credible as well. And I think that's the big, and one of the things that I've always had to deal with, and certainly from a London role, is the bias of research. Unless you've got a million people on a study, for some reason that isn't the only people, and that's really difficult. And like Martin says, sometimes it's so difficult to justify small work that you do in the backyard of your practice, and it becomes such a nightmare to do that. And sometimes I think as clinical professionals, we create more barriers than anything. And so I do agree with Martin's point, start small. Let's develop the idea together, and then we start affecting change. And the other thing is also having people like Martin and others who always support you. You do need inspiring leaders to be right behind you, because that also can be a problem. So I don't think it's easy, because we have a certain methodology in the NHS, unfortunately. And it requires a really strong communication, and also really hearing that co-production. NHS is really poor on co-production. I'm going to say it, but it's the fact. And sometimes hearing a patient voice and on how much it's done for them is so powerful. And I think we should be doing more of that. So I'm not answering everything that you're saying, but I think start small, communicate the project well, and also look at something that tangible outcomes, and go to the right people as well.
Thank you, Jay. We do have one more question, and in the best interest of time, can I ask either of you, just one of you, to answer the question, please, if you may. Amina.
Hi, I'm Amina. My question is, so I'm a newly qualified GP, so I've been a GP for a year and a bit, and everyone I know who's at a similar stage to me is just completely overwhelmed and is looking down, I don't know, a career and thinking, how the F are we going to do this? Because right now it just feels impossible. And it's like everything that we thought was what we were going to be doing isn't. And I think, so I'm working for a PCN on health inequalities in Lewisham, and trying to pull out, I'm sure everyone here believes in what you're talking about, but I think when people are so overwhelmed, how do we pull them out of the firefighting and the exhaustion to like stop and realize the value in this?
Martin, are you going to have a go?
So we're always the last people fighting at the bridge of our last set of rounds. We're always the last person there. We're always going to be overwhelmed and over demanded. We always think it's our fault for not being perfect, and we're not perfect. Systems aren't perfect, and situations aren't perfect, and you haven't done enough and not enough, and everyone's around you. That's not how it works. It works by you understand that this is a problem, this is a process, and you do what you can. You need to make time in your life for yourself to be who you are. And do what you do and have those communications and relationships to be a true person with a work-life balance, first of all. So you're actually capable of actually assessing that problem and working in your job. And you need to find the joy in your job. And that sounds a bit existentialistly, but you've got to find the happiness, the smile, the connection, the meaning to what you do every day. Every communication can be positive. Everything you say can provide something, and everything you do as a personal authority, an individual who needs support, is beneficial. And you've got to reflect on what's good about that, and you've got to share that, celebrate that with your colleagues and your partners and your friends, okay? And the work will always be there, and you will do what you can to the best of your ability. And that's all you can do. When you link with colleagues and you share that success and you share that ambition, you will find there's a groundswell if you want to do the same things by you. And the system is turning. People like yourself are not alone. I recognize everything you said and everything you're fearful of. I was same thing 30 years ago when I started as a house officer. I was called in those days, and that hasn't changed. What I'm reassured by now is a huge community of individuals in and outside of healthcare who want to do the same thing and are prepared to work and listen together, listen differently. The challenges will not change, but the way we solve them has. We are working together, we are listening, okay, and we are compassionate. And we're going to make sure that you and your colleagues have the best work and life balance you can, do the best work you can, doing a job that you love and are great at.
Feel a bit emotional. Thank you.
I think we all feel a bit emotional. Thank you so much. Okay, then we have a video.
Yes, sorry, yes I am. I can't find.
We're going to ask everyone in the room to get drinks.
We've got drinks.
Music. Thank you, Jay and Martin. You've been absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, thank you.
Spotlight, a place where young people can discover their talents, strive to achieve their goals and become well balanced. A place you can connect with like-minded creatives, work with professionals to uncover the artists within you. They don't just put you out there, they teach and prepare you to be the best elsewhere. Even when the world went in, they brought the light and showed us in, taught us how to make the most of it and smile even in the midst of it. At Spotlight, I've learned to just believe in myself and believe in my skills. I'm an individual with an original mind, being bold and confident made me achieve. The staff don't get enough praise for the time, effort and encouragement they put to raise future leaders, artists and directors, and make a child feel special and loved every day. So I want to say thank you for all your ways, Spotlight.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me to this wonderful event. My name is Noreen Batty, and I have been the head of school for general practice for the last 5 years, working with our wonderful educator network to support and train GP trainees. But I'm moving on from that role, and I'm now going to be the new strategic lead for workforce race equality within the relatively new primary care school for London. And in this role, I'm also going to be leading on differential attainment and improving this for our GP trainees in London. I wanted to talk a little bit today about what our workforce race equality strategy is going to be. We have known for over 5 years really from the collection of NHS workforce race equality standard data that the experience of our ethnic minority staff is much poorer than their white colleagues. But it's taken COVID really to really show how disproportionate this experience is. We haven't got the benefit of systematic collection of res data in primary care, but we know from 3 recent surveys over the last 18 months. The RES pilot in Lewisham, the North East London survey on racism and discrimination, and the Humberside LMC survey, that the experience of our staff in primary care is no different to that of our secondary care colleagues. Staff disproportionately reported overt racism from patients and colleagues. If not overt, they reported microaggressions, othering and racial discrimination. They are more likely to experience harassment and bullying at work, more likely to undergo disciplinary action, and feel really very unable to speak up if they see racial discrimination at work, be that to patients or colleagues. People still cannot bring their whole self to work, and we need to change this. Furthermore, we know that there's a whole body of evidence collected over the last few years that differential attainment exists for doctors throughout their careers. And again, the recent MRES, although it didn't include GPs, does show just how marked this is and how things have not changed despite the collection, despite the growing body of evidence. And although we don't have MRES data for GPs, we do know from the GMC data that differential attainment in our GP trainees is probably amongst the worst of any medical specialty in London. So with this in mind, we've launched our primary care workforce race strategy for London as one of the 4 priorities for the primary care school. At the heart of it will be the facilitation of a survey for all staff, clinical and non-clinical, across London. And this will be the first attempt to collect data across London. But we know that data is not enough. This does need to be part of a wider strategy. So we have at the heart, we're going to develop, key to this is the development of our multi-professional leadership networks, one in each integrated care system area. These will be tangible, strong, permanent presences supporting and driving equality and diversity in the heart of all the work we do, as well as supporting our primary care colleagues. In addition, we recognise the enormous contribution made by our nurses and doctors who trained abroad, and we want to support them at the core of our strategy. And to this effect, we've appointed a programme director to specifically support international medical graduates. But there's no magic bullet. Racism is due to deep, entrenched, underlying causes rooted in history. I want to quote Audre Lorde, the American writer, feminist and civil activist, who said, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." We need to think outside the box and make changes in our policies and procedures if we're really going to ensure that diversity and inclusion is at the heart of the NHS. There's a long way to go, but I really now believe that there is a will, and we're working to address racism in the NHS. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Vikesh. Vikesh, are you there? And he's going to talk about thriving Stockwell health and well-being.
Hello everyone, I'm Vikesh Sharma. I'm a GP in South London, around Stockwell, Lambeth. Thank you so much for having me here this evening. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there in person. And my little story tonight is about my journey from going from paper to plants, which basically summarises my experiences over the last 7-8 years. Stockwell, for those who don't know, areas of high socioeconomic deprivation, lots of language and cultural barriers. 30% of my patients are Portuguese speaking. And so over the last few years, I've been really interested in exploring spaces where we can create new ways of working and that sort of interface between primary care and community. And for me, it's been an incredible experience, which is ongoing. And there's certain things that I've really taken to heart. One is embracing diversity. I hadn't quite realized how much we sometimes link diversity with the problem and almost think of diversity as the problem. And actually a lot of the solutions exist within all the different ways of thinking that are out there. The thing that I actually did the most over the last few years is shift power, because a lot of it sits within the system, and actually advocating for my colleagues out in the community and sort of joining the dots and that big picture thinking is a lot of what I did. And investing in relationships, you know, I can't stress that enough. We rush to sort of get templates and sort of replicate them very quickly, but actually it's the local relationships, the trust and value, and you know, it might be a lot upfront, but actually it pays dividends long term. And so yeah, over the last few years, we've gone from small projects to a community network, and now we're a community interest company called Lambeth Portuguese Wellbeing Partnership. And I wanted to tell you about one moment in particular that summarizes my journey. So these lovely people here are part of a project called the Household Model. And in this picture here, what you can see us doing is actually discussing the concept of well-being. How do you ask the questions around it? How do you assess it? And I really remember quite clearly when I was in that meeting, when we were thinking about it, I was being very clinical. I was thinking of all the sort of the questionnaires and surveys that I knew out of it, very paper-based, right? But actually I was outnumbered. I was the only clinician there. And these amazing minds came together and said, you know what we're going to do is we're going to give a seed to these households or these people part of the project. And we're going to ask them to grow this plant. And this will be a daily reminder and embodiment of well-being within that household. And they can tend to it, and they can reflect on it. And yeah, this is what we'll use as our marker of well-being, which clearly blew my mind, and I wasn't really sure about it. But it's just been amazing, and we've had such incredible stories through this project. But don't take my word for it. I will now introduce you to Eva Nilsson, who is very courageous resident locally who took part in this project. And yeah, just listen to what he has to say.
Before the project, I into my life smoking. I smoke every day. Every problem, problem in leave, because como posso dizer, já cheguei a dormir na rua, como posso dizer,
I was homeless, slept on the street.
Homeless,
And you smoked drugs, basically. You smoked, yeah.
E later, the project, my life changed 100%, because at the meeting, I feel very happy. I feel my confidence.
Qual foi a atividade que nós pedimos para fazer sobre a prioridade?
Put the bean in the plant the bean.
So you planted some beans.
Yeah, I remember Maria João telling me I care the bean.
Your job is to look after it.
Yeah. I plant the bean com love, com passion, com passion, né? I care the bean. I remember que maybe 3 or 4 days later, the bean was very, very big. Very, seriously, I look at the bean. Oh my God, impossible. I said, Maria João, one question. The bean is good or evil? Later, I see, later jog, I see the bean is born, strong, beautiful, because I put my passion, my care, my love, result, and my my plant, because in my room,
The result.
the result, my room, food, plant, flowers, I love it. So I want to make the course of photography.
Yes.
In the future, right?
Yeah.
It cares my health. Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much to Ivan Nilsson who shared his story with us. Somehow I think that my paper-based assessment forms wouldn't have had that impact on him. Thank you for listening.
It was so lovely when he said about putting his passion and his love into the plants. It was so beautiful, wasn't it? I'm delighted. Thank you, Vikesh and Ivan Nilsson. Emma, over to you.
Thank you. I'm Emma Radcliffe. I'm a GP just down the road at the Aberfeldy practice. And I was one of the faculty, say, sustainability scholars last year. But tonight I'm a gardener and I'm bringing you the seeds of climate action tonight. These, if you want a detailed chat about, discussion about decarbonising general practice or the IPCC report and the urgent need to act, then we can direct you somewhere else. But tonight, these are my seeds. These are things that may have worked for us and may work for you in promoting some climate action. So the first is the tea bag. Try and think about something that may provoke a discussion. This changing our tea bags provoked an all-out mutiny in our practice, but trying to change to fair trade tea bags or tea bags without plastic. And the main thing is explaining why, just to provoke a discussion, maybe change the milk, knowing that meat and dairy are a big source of a carbon footprint, maybe something. My next suggestion would be to think about what motivates people. This is what we've done in Tower Hamlets, which are our climate pledges, which a few practices have engaged with, whether it's just educating other people, have a discussion amongst peers, or just promoting some healthy competition. Certainly in our practice, there's a few more people who have not bought clothes for a year, maybe 6 months, or a few electric vehicles rather than petrol vehicles, and lots of other discussion gone on. My next suggestion was to buy less, use less and waste less. These are some masks which we're using in our practice, and there's over 1,000 in use. They're type 2R, MRHA approved and suitable for clinical practice. I think less is always more, generally more in climate action. And next, think about, as we're also time poor, think about the things that impact most, and maybe one of the biggest things that you can do as a practice or individual is change your energy provider. And I couldn't resist. So bearing in mind that whatever you do as an individual or as a practice or even as the NHS, you're going to have very limited impact unless the government changes and the big business changes. So if you want to protest, then do get in touch. And now I want to just show you one seed that I planted when I said I wanted a video in our practice for our waiting room about climate change. Discussed it with Poplar Harker, who put me in touch with the Spotlight Centre, which is a youth group locally. And this is a small snippet of the film that we created, hopefully to be played in a waiting room when they're properly open and being used a bit more, but was also shown as at the council opening of their big climate plan. I hope it can be played just for a couple of minutes.
Tower Hamlets, like the rest of the world, is at a crossroads. Down one path lie floods, food shortages, toxic air, and more deadly pandemics. Down the other lie difficult choices, hard work, and sacrifice. But there also lies hope. Hope for a world in which young people and generations yet unborn can enjoy their lives without fear of natural disaster. Hope for a more sustainable future. If we are to take the path of hope, then all of the strength and resolve of the people of Tower Hamlets will be needed. But the effort required during the COVID crisis to maintain the lockdown has shown that when it comes to protecting the health of those we care about, we are willing to make the difficult but necessary choices. We've heard the facts, the stories, and the solutions. Now it's down to us to rise to the challenge. If you believe we can do better, speak to your friends, your family, your community, your school, GP, local councillors, and MPs, and together, let's take action. It's time for change.
Just one small thing. So we'd really like everybody to think about one small thing that they could change. And now over to Philippa.
Thank you very much, Sally. My name is Philippa Cockman. I'm a GP up the road, St Stephen's, not too far from here. But I'm here tonight in my role as appraisal lead for GPs in London. And I've actually recorded something earlier, but I wanted to just add something at the beginning, which is that really, I think my main message is, listening to all of this, is there's so much great things to do. But all of us need to really look after ourselves, and self-care is so important. So I think that's my main message and I hope that comes through in the way appraisal is being delivered at the moment. But yeah, I recorded something earlier, and yeah, I hope you like the pictures.
But it's really lovely to have you here in person as well.
Thanks.
It's really,
Hello, my name is Philippa Cockman. I'm a GP by background, but my main role now is with NHS England and Improvement in London, and I'm London-wide GP appraisal lead. I'm just back from Scotland, and it was a good reminder for me of the need to reconnect with nature, the great outdoors, and for those that know me well, maybe slightly extreme levels of activity, like hiking through the middle of nowhere and setting up camp for the night. But I think we all need time to recharge the batteries, and not just for the holidays, but during our busy working weeks. I know of GPs who find it really helpful to get outdoors for maybe just 10 or 15 minutes each day. Others who run to unwind, and those that cycle find the journey home can be enough time to de-stress and be ready for family life by the time they get there. And others that enjoy their gardens. It's whatever works for you. So what's this got to do with GP appraisal? You may know that 2020 saw significant changes to the appraisal model, giving even more emphasis on a professional developmental conversation with a peer, giving space for resourceful people to think and time to reflect, talk about health and well-being and whatever matters most, and a time to celebrate achievements. What's my vision for the future? I think it's really that appraisal becomes part of a wider, positive coaching culture within the NHS for individuals and for teams. For example, linking up with all the blossoming coaching and mentoring schemes across London, for a kind and compassionate NHS that says thank you for everyone's contributions and allows resourceful people to flourish. Thank you to all the organisers of this, and thank you for the invitation to be part of another inspirational evening. I'd just like to finish by saying we are actually currently recruiting for more GP appraisers, so do contact me if you'd like to know more, if you're interested or you know somebody else that might be. Thank you again and enjoy your evening. Brilliant. And did you take those photos when you were away just? I did, yes. Sorry. Thank you so much. I'd share some of the outfits. Yeah, share them a long way from East London. Yeah. It's really
lovely. I feel relaxed now, much more relaxed. Thank you, Philippa.
It's really lovely to welcome Alex and Sarjan, who are medical students from Imperial, and they did a really interesting project which they spoke to us about as part of, it was your Year 3 project, wasn't it? So over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex. It's great to be here. Thank you so much. And it's been fascinating to hear all your stories so far.
And I'm Sajan as well. And as we said, we're now 4th year medical students at Imperial, and we're going to talk to you guys about a project that we worked on this year.
So we were based in a GP practice in Soho, just by Chinatown, and we're going to explain a bit about what we did there.
So when you think of Soho, typically you might think of the bars, the restaurants, the buzzing crowd. But in reality, when you actually look up, you'll see there are loads of apartments and flats absolutely full of people. And if you think of that, you'd think these residents may be living in grand townhouses, it's in central London. But in actual fact, there's actually it's a hugely deprived area as well. And there's a huge disparity in income in the Soho area.
And we were really surprised to learn this. We thought it would be a very wealthy area, but actually that wasn't the case at all. Sajan, maybe you could explain a bit more about the patients that we met in this area.
Yeah, so our GP practice was located right above Chinatown. So there was a huge Chinese patient population. And there were lots of patients who didn't speak English and depended on their children to come to appointments to translate. The practice also used Language Line a lot, and they had some staff who were able to speak Chinese in different dialects for those patients too.
Yeah, and as well as this patient population, obviously Soho has a really iconic place in LGBTQ+ history, and it's still a hub for this population. So lots of patients, for example, were living with HIV, had questions around HIV, and were taking PrEP. And we met quite a lot of patients who didn't actually live nearby to the practice, but chose to register there because of their inclusive approach and their knowledge on LGBTQ+ health issues. And so being far away from the practice, especially in a lockdown, made it really challenging for some of these patients to come to appointments and get referrals, particularly around vaccines.
And something that Alex and I both noticed and found quite ironic was often these voices weren't heard, the patient groups weren't heard, because the patient participation group was mainly, like the demographic we saw was mainly older, middle-class white patients, and wasn't representative of the whole patient group, leaving some voices out. And alongside this, like everywhere, I'm sure you guys face similar things. COVID really, really impacted our practice.
Yeah, so we started this placement in January 2021, so we were right in the thick of it. And this was right at the beginning of the vaccination rollout. So of course, patients weren't coming into the practice as much, and everyone was relying on online information and word of mouth a lot of the time. So we saw all this unfold in the first few days and weeks of the placement, and we wanted to do something that would help.
Yeah, so Imperial students in general have to do something called a community action project, which is to serve the local patient population. And this doesn't actually count towards the final mark. So most people just do something to pass. But we really, we noticed this patient population, we noticed these problems going on, and we really, really wanted to make a difference for these patients because we were given such a unique opportunity. And, given the patient population and problems they were facing, there were so many directions we could have gone in, but we needed to choose one specific one just to make sure we could meet the time constraints.
So what we noticed in particular was that although the practice was very well set up to serve the local Chinese speaking population normally, they had GPs, receptionists, the pharmacy staff, all that spoke between them Mandarin and Cantonese. However, during the pandemic, with information coming out very quickly from the government and from the kind of central NHS messaging, There was loads of information about COVID and vaccines, which was constantly changing, and it was almost exclusively in English.
And there's a lot of concepts that were being shared through this information. So things like vaccination groups, the difference between being extremely clinically vulnerable and being at risk. Also the order in which the vaccine rollout was happening. It was just really, really confusing for everyone, not just people who didn't speak English, but also, the English speaking patients too. And patients just had so many questions. And some of them are about getting the vaccine and some of them are about how to actually book an appointment.
Yeah, and we noticed that it was using up a lot of time at the practice for all the staff, with patients calling and booking appointments, emailing, asking about when they could get their vaccine, which group that they were going to be in. So that was confusing for everyone, but obviously particularly if patients didn't speak English and weren't able to access this information online very easily.
And so what we decided to work on was we came up with an idea for a leaflet or like a poster to simplify this information, to try and make it accessible to as many patients as possible. We really wanted to make it super clear who the vaccine priority groups were. We wanted to be clear and concise. And we also wanted to reassure patients that they would be contacted directly when it was their turn, and also dispelling some of the common myths and rumors going around surrounding the vaccine. And something that was important to us too was that these weren't just available in English. So we also had them translated into simplified and traditional Chinese.
And this was something that really made our project a lot better, I think, was working with a local group, the BME Health Forum, and one of their trustees, Eddie Chan, who is based in Soho and has done a lot of work with the Chinese community there. And so he helped us to draft the leaflet and to get it translated into simplified and traditional Chinese, and also came up with a few myths that he had heard and vaccine misinformation that was circulating in the local community.
And there were some really, really interesting myths that Alex and I had never heard of. Do you want to share some of them, Alex?
Yeah, definitely. So mainly was that the Chinese made vaccine Sinovac was designed specifically for Chinese people and therefore would work better in this group. It was safer and more effective, and that the embassy was going to be distributing this soon, so don't get the NHS vaccine, which was obviously completely unfounded and was leaving people at risk as they waited. There was worries that Pfizer was dangerous and could kill you. And also, on the other hand, although people were very nervous about getting vaccines or hesitant to get vaccines, they were also very nervous about COVID. A lot of people were working in frontline customer-facing roles in shops, for example, and had quite high exposure. So there was a lot of worry going around at that time.
So we made this leaflet and we decided to try and share it with as many patients as possible. So we shared it to the practice newsletter, the website, put it up in the waiting room, in the local pharmacy. We really just wanted to make sure wherever patients were going, because obviously they weren't all going in the waiting room, they could see this information clearly.
Yeah, and in your mind, what kind of impact did this have, Sajin? What was the impact of our intervention?
Yeah, so I mean, if I start with the aim, we really wanted to reduce the amount of time spent by practice staff addressing these vaccine-related queries, also making patients more confident about the vaccine and wanting, encouraging uptake. And, the feedback we got from the practice staff was they found it very helpful and a great way of communicating this information. And also the pharmacy team and some of the patients that had come by really found it useful in terms of just clarifying the whole process of getting a vaccine.
Success. Excellent. And what did you learn from this process, Sajin?
So I think the two main things that I learned was, one, just medical jargon. I guess when you're working in the profession, you just don't realize when you're using it. So for example, if it says that if you have a respiratory disease, you're eligible for the COVID vaccine at a certain point in time, patients with asthma or COPD might not identify as a patient with a respiratory disease because they know they have asthma or COPD, but respiratory disease is that medical jargon. So just making little adjustments and making sure it's accessible for patients can make such a huge difference. And how about you, Alex? What was the sort of main things you learned from this?
Yeah, I think the most important thing I learned that I will definitely try my best to take forward in the future is to be really cognizant of the unique community that you're serving wherever you are, and that every community has very unique needs. And it's so easy, particularly in high pressure situations such as the pandemic, where everything is chaos. And it's so easy for some of these communities to be left out and left behind, which obviously widens disparities in healthcare. And something really simple like translating a document and distributing it to everyone that needs it can try and make sure that everyone who you're trying to reach is actually able to access this information, and could even hopefully have an impact like increasing vaccination rates.
Sergeant and Alex. Sorry to interrupt you. Absolutely to interrupt you. Stop that. Thank you so much. Absolutely phenomenal work. You know, an excellent presentation. Thank you. We're going to take a short break, just a couple of minutes, and we'll see you soon.
Carry my way, carry my way, carry me, and my mountain. Divine intervention, Jehovah walked on water, grandma raised the suffer pension. Mama working extra, Papa he no even make the effort, except for when he walked away and left us. Now I'm taller with my head up, I can stand on my own too now. Grudges that I carry make my leg hurt. I hope my dragon ain't too loud. My face will tell you that I'm fed up. Try to move but I cannot. Rock roll, sashing knees and elbows. Hair grainy feet, blistered from walking these hell roads. Just so you know.
Welcome back, everyone. Now we have Lydia.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lydia. I'm an F1 currently in the South Thames Deanery. I'm just going to share my screen with you. I'm here to talk about a little project I did during my elective period. And I did it along with two other people, but they weren't able to make it tonight, but I'm representing them. So we're talking about kind of creating health in an urban community. So according to the Health Creation Alliance, a person's well-being is influenced by 3 C's: meaningful social contact, control over circumstances, and confidence to take responsibility in their own lives and in their communities. So this is like a positive psychology approach, focusing on improving and protecting well-being rather than merely treating illnesses. A lot of the messages that I'm going to kind of convey to you have already been covered this evening, but I hope you don't mind me kind of going over them and from a different approach. So as we all know, empowering people to self-care and building resilient communities is crucial in this time of ever-increasing pressures on our healthcare system. So my elected partners and I wanted to know what a well community looked like to local people. So we teamed up with a community partnership group and hosted some focus groups via Zoom, open to residents of North Hammersmith and Fulham. 3 key themes were drawn out of our discussions, and I'll run through each of them along with some adapted quotes from our participants. So the first theme was social connectedness. One resident mentioned valuing just being able to know that there are people in your community that you could just say, you know, I'm not feeling great, and they just pop around. As others mentioned, it was clear that the first lockdown especially was a real key catalyst for building these kind of connections between neighbours. Another described noticing microcosms of humanity in their local area, such as young people on their buses, getting up from their seats consistently to offer to older people and people in need. Many residents commented on how they want to celebrate the diversity of their area and that they feel that they can just be authentically themselves, maybe more than in some other areas of London.
They recognize the benefit of having space to share with each other their lived experiences, even within the Zoom focus groups that we were holding. So the second thing that was valuable to our participants was that service provision in their area was driven by and tailored to the community. One person said they don't like that sometimes people in need can't receive the support that they want. Sometimes people lack understanding or knowledge, so even if there is a support mechanism in place, they don't know how to access it. So this highlighted to us that even where there are services in place, they may not be easy or accessible. And that's kind of a disconnect between the service provision and the community itself. Others spoke about the need to involve patients in the process of tackling long-term systemic problems that we see in healthcare, for which there may not be a quick solution. And the suggestions were lobbying and just talking and raising awareness of those things. Overall in this area, it was really clear that there was such a wealth of knowledge and passion amongst the participants, and some even spoke about starting their own initiatives like cycling clubs for their neighbours and mental health support groups. So a third key aspect of well-being was the physical environment which they lived in. One participant in particular pointed out that traffic and all the associated air pollution shouldn't necessarily be something that they just have to live with, and said we need to be telling the local authority as a community that we don't want this any longer. In this, we were able to see that many were already mobilized to lobby for change. Alongside this, some commented on how